Hi everyone, in today's video I am going to explain what is subject effect and what is experimenter effect in research and how both can threaten the internal validity of your research study. I will use a few different examples to convey the point, and the knowledge of this can then be utilized and modified to addressing concerns or similar concerns in your own research studies. So let's get started. So first let me explain what is subject effect. Subject effect is when participants behave differently from the way they normally would. Now this happens when firstly the participants know that they are being observed, so sometimes they would behave in a more controlled fashion or in a more aggressive way. They become conscious of the fact that somebody is observing them or maybe somebody is recording their behavior. Um, so they don't behave the way they normally would in natural settings, of course, because they know they are being observed, or they are trying to please the researcher, especially if the researcher has talked to them about the hypothesis and the results he or she is expecting from the research. So the participants are trying to behave as the researcher would expect them to behave to get that particular outcome or to address the hypothesis. Participants may also sometimes behave differently from how they would expect or how they are expected to behave when they are trying to mix in with the group. So for example, you are conducting a focus group session and you are asking questions from the participants in a focus group, and one participant may not be agreeing with the most popular opinion or the opinion of the majority of the audience, but he or she goes along with them so that they don't stand out or they don't sound different from what the major participants are saying. Now these subject effects can be controlled for, can be addressed in research, and this is something I will discuss in detail in my next video. Please watch that video as well. I will also discuss how to control for experiment effects. But now this is subject effects. Subject effects is something where participants are aware of either the fact that they are being observed or the hypothesis or why the research has been designed, or simply that the fact that they are under scrutiny, so they have to behave in a way as expected from them by society in general or by observers. Then we have the experimenter effect, and this experimenter effect can also threaten the internal validity of a research. This is especially so in experimental studies as well as quasi-research study design. And experimenter effect is normally caused either due to the personality traits of the researcher, where in fact they may not cause an experimental effect intentionally, but it may occur because of their personality trait. I will give you examples as we go along. Or the experimental effect may be caused due to the non-verbal cues as provided by the researcher, which provides an indication of what kind of behavior or what kind of response is expected from the participant. Now, these non-verbal cues kind of give away the researcher's body language, the expressions, their agreement or disagreement with what the participants are saying. This is especially so if the researcher is involved in some kind of a qualitative interview, data collection. When it comes to the personality traits, the personality traits could be that the researcher is either being biased towards achieving a certain outcome, and this bias is not caused consciously, it is caused subconsciously or unconsciously, where the researcher is expecting a certain outcome, and because of that he or she modifies their behavior or behaves in a such way to get. So what happens is here the dependent variable gets affected because the changes that are caused in the dependent variable in both subject and experimental effects is then due to some other factor and not due to the independent variable. So I can give you an example of experimental effect where I said that the researcher's behavior may cause an issue. So take an example of a class where you've divided them into two class groups, right? And what you have done is you are trying to investigate the effect of two teaching models. One could be inquiry based learning, where the students engage in practices which lead to them asking questions and finding answers. And the other one could be project based learning, where the students are provided with a project and the students learn by via the project making. Here you are trying to study the effect of the teaching models, which could be the independent variable, on the student scores or their marks, which becomes the dependent variable. However, the two teachers that you have employed in teaching the students subconsciously or consciously or due to bias are completely different from one another. Where one group, let's say you are slightly biased towards the inquiry based learning and you are expecting better results from that, you allot an experienced teacher, a highly competent teacher to teaching that group. And for the project based learning, where you are expecting students to get lower marks, you allot a much younger or a less experienced or less competent teacher. Now, this could be a conscious act or it could be a subconscious act. I'm not saying researchers are unethical here, but that could be where it has resulted in an experimental effect. Now, because of this, the students' scores then get influenced. It may not be because of the teaching model, but because of the teacher. So here you have to, as a researcher, make sure that the experience of the teacher, the competence of the teacher is equivalent. So both the teachers who are using separate teaching models should be equivalent in terms of experience and competence, and so that these extraneous variables remain consistent and the changes that you see in the dependent variable is purely due to the independent variable, in this case the teaching models, and not due to the extraneous variables where the experience of the teacher is causing the change in the dependent variable. Again, with experiment effect and personal bias, the reason is the same. So again, you are trying to, and these are different examples I have taken. So here again, uh, you may be consciously trying to modify your research in getting an outcome that you wish to get or that will support the hypothesis that you have proposed. And in that case, sometimes you may alter the sample or you may allot student groups, hoping that you get the expected result. You may subconsciously choose to avoid certain responses in a qualitative study or in an interview and adapt them to an understanding which supports your research. You would rather go and have a lesser sample of people supporting your hypothesis than a large sample of people who and modifying their statements to support your null hypothesis. So you get the idea here. So basically, I'm not saying, remember, that the researchers are unethical, but we all suffer from a certain personal bias which comes in because of the time we spend in designing a research study. So that's why when you are designing a research study itself, you must account for these biases and develop control measures, which I will discuss in my next video, and to addressing these. So to avoid these, because if you address these and you control for these and you mention them in your research while you are writing the research, or you are explaining the methodology or the research design, the examiners and the reviewers are happy to see that you not only identified it, but you put in measures to address for it as well. So make sure that it doesn't matter if the findings or the results are not supporting your hypothesis, it is still a finding and you can use that as a basis. It is not that you fail, unless of course you are being paid commercially by your sponsors, and they're paying you millions of dollars to get an outcome. That is the point, that time you, of course, you have to deliver a result and you have to be very honest to deliver that result. But if you're doing a PhD or a research, or you're just writing a paper and conducting experiments, even if the outcome doesn't support your hypothesis, that is still an outcome, that is still something that you can discuss and you can present to your readers, and that will also be considered worthwhile research. So thank you for watching today's video, guys, and in my next video, like I mentioned, I will discuss different ways of addressing experimental and subject effects in research. Bye for now.